Alright guys, welcome back to another episode of the League Express podcast. My name's Jake Kearnan, and joining me as always is the editor of League Express, Martyn, Sadler. And Martyn, a special guest today.
In the middle, of course, the legend, Garry Schofield, one of the greatest players ever to play for England and Great Britain, and the record holder jointly with Mick Sullivan with 46 Great Britain caps. So welcome, Garry. A pleasure to have you here again. Always a pleasure to have you here, of course. And we're looking forward to having the benefit of your wisdom and insight into everything you've been watching over the last week or so.
Martyn, thanks for that nice introduction, to be honest with you. But yeah, looking forward again to giving my open, honest opinion, because it has been a very important week for rugby league.
Absolutely, mate. It's been a while since we've had you on the podcast, mate, so it's great to have you back. But let's jump straight into it, fellas. Obviously, we had the grand final take place over the weekend. Wigan champions defeating Hull KR 9 points to 2, a unique scoreline.
The lowest ever scoreline, actually, the lowest number of points ever in a grand final. Yeah. Last year it was 10-2, wasn't it, against Wigan against Catalans. This year 9-2, only 11 points, but I still really enjoyed the game. You sometimes think a low-scoring game might be a bit turgid to watch, but I actually thought it was a good game to watch. What did you think, Garry?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it's a good game from there, but again, grand final time's Wigan time, isn't it? And I guess the only thing I would say about it, I know everybody was praising Wigan's defence and how quality defence Wigan had. Yes, they did. But most importantly, you expect Wigan, or any defence in Super League, certainly when Hull KR were asking some questions 25, 30 out, very, very solid. The only question mark I would put against Hull KR's performance was, is that They was like waiting for things to happen rather than making things happen. I would have liked to have seen more from the halfbacks in Tyrone Mane and Mikey Lewis around about 40-50 metres out from Wigan's try line, asking some questions there on the third and fourth and fifth tackle, because at times Wigan, as we know defensively, they don't panic, they're very patient, and I say really, Hull KR for me on attack, they didn't throw enough. The
thing is, if you're going to beat Wigan, you've clearly got to do something exceptional, haven't you? There's no point in just, playing five tackles, trying to get into their half and then putting a kick into the corner. Because they're just ready for that, aren't they?
That's what they did a lot, yeah.
And it might, sometimes against lesser teams that might work, but against Wigan it doesn't really. And Hull KR probably needed to have far more variety in their attack. And actually, they need to have more than one player with a good kicking game, I think, as well. There was too much, in my opinion, resting on Mikey Lewis's shoulders. And, he's a fine young player, but, it didn't work on this. Having said that, they only lost by 7 points, so it's not as though they were disgraced. They competed throughout the 80 minutes. It wasn't as though they got hammered, but nonetheless they never quite looked as though they were going to score, did they? Apart from one or two instances where tries were disallowed.
Well, you see, again, that's where your halfback partner comes in, But Tyrone Mane, when we look at it last year when he played for Catalans, he was very disappointed with Mitchell Pearce, wasn't he? He just did not inject himself into the game, where we were looking for a bit more variation, a little bit more pressure taken off Mikey Lewis, and Tyrone Mane, for me, again,
he didn't look to be a big game player, did he?
No, he was very disappointed. And then when we looked at the last 10 or 15 minutes, he was trying to come into the game, but they just came up with mistakes. Well, that's quite clearly because they're under pressure, they're looking to do things what maybe they should not be doing, but as I say, that's the pressure what we can put on you. But now we're very disappointing with a variation of Hull KR's attack.
Speaking on attack, like throughout the day in Manchester, it seemed like it was a sunny sort of day. It was threatening to rain all day, but it didn't rain right up until about an hour or so before kick-off, as you'd expect in Manchester. But do you think the wet conditions had any impact on some of the attacking flair we saw on Saturday?
Well, they probably did, but it's hard to actually say exactly how, isn't it? You can't sort of... You've got to judge the game as it was, not how it might have been if it had still been dry. You can't really say, would the result have been any different if there'd been no rain? Well, probably not, to be perfectly honest. I still think Wigan would have won, and they might have won. Obviously, if the weather's bad, you would tend to think that top of the ground runners like Bevan French would be severely disadvantaged. But actually, he scored the outstanding try and gave us the thrilling moment of the whole game, didn't he?
Yeah, and I say also, that the rain wasn't that heavy, was it? All right, they had that bit of a hailstone, didn't they, for about 5 minutes or so. So I don't buy into that whatsoever. OKR came with a game plan. It wasn't a game plan. That certainly was. He wasn't going to beat Wigan, because it's a sort of game plan what Wigan play, don't they? They, as I say, they're very patient. They don't panic. All the individuals know their own roles, and then that complements the team when it comes to the team environment from a point of view with attack and also in defence from there. So I don't buy into the scenario that it was a little bit too wet for Hull KR to throw the ball about.
I actually suspect, Gary, that Hull KR's game plan was mainly focused on defence, and in particular not allowing Wigan to score a try early in the game. Because if you think back to that Challenge Cup semi-final at Doncaster earlier this season, when Hull KR went into it with a lot of people thinking they were going to beat Wigan and get to Wembley, Wigan blasted them early on and were 24-0 up at half-time. Now, that's seared into your memory, isn't it? If you're a coach and you're a player, we can't let them do that again.
Well, the big thing about that, though, Martyn, was OKR came up with schoolboy mistakes, didn't they? They were just schoolboy mistakes. There wasn't a lot of pressure put on the OKR players what they came up with.
So on this occasion, they were probably being overcautious.
Correct, absolutely.
To be perfectly honest, not to make mistakes again. And you can understand why they would have that approach. But the thing is, as we've said already, you've got to be creative to beat Wigan. You can't expect to beat them when you're not. And if you look at the times this year when Wigan have been beaten, including at Hull KR early in the season,
correct. Yeah.
It's when teams have actually been prepared to challenge them and throw the ball around and take them on early. Warrington had a great win against Wigan, didn't they? Earlier in the season. That's the sort of template that people ought to be studying to see whether there is a way to beat Wigan. Even then, might not do, because Wigan are so professional, and so Wigan seem prepared for every option, as far as I can tell. So it's always going to be hard to beat them.
But if any team in Super League, certainly in semi-finals or finals, think they're going to beat Wigan by going toe-to-toe, going set for set, there's only ever going to be one winner, and that's going to be Wigan Rugby League Club.
And that is partly, Gary, because Wigan have got such a great kicking game from Harry Smith.
Correct.
I thought, I know, the first ever Rob Burrow award, and we'll talk about that, went to Bevan French, but I actually thought Harry Smith's kicking game was an absolutely massive factor in Wigan's win. His kicking game was so, on point.
It was so varied as well, wasn't it?
Varied,
so varied.
yeah.
Yes,
and,
it was.
He's developed into, I think, the best, midfield kicker in the game at the moment. Yeah. And, he's always finding the space to kick the ball into, always putting the, Hull KR under pressure when they're having to bring the ball out of their own half and so on. And I think he's a really vital cog in that wheel.
He's become a very smart halfback, hasn't he?
And it's going to be interesting to see whether he actually gets selected for England against Samoa. So we'll have to. There's a lot to think about that. We'll probably talk about that a bit later too.
Yeah, and just with his kicks as well, obviously keeping it away from Ryan Hall as well. I don't think he fielded many kicks at all.
No.
Just looking across the board, obviously we mentioned Harry Smith. Who were the other standout players for Wigan in your eyes?
Well, Luke Thompson was, I thought, was outstanding. And it's a bit unfortunate. He's been suspended for 2 matches, although there is an appeal going in, so we don't know what the outcome of that is yet. But Luke might miss the Test series against Samoa because of that suspension, which would be very unfortunate, I think. I do think, again, Gary, I'd welcome your view on this. But I'm a great believer, if you're suspended in one competition, I think you should serve that suspension in that competition, not in an international context, because quite frankly, we're just almost stabbing ourselves in the back.
We're penalising
ourselves.
Yes. On his day, Luke Thompson is the best English front rower going, isn't he?
He's a terrific player.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
And to not have him there against the Samoans, we're just penalising ourselves.
It will be, absolutely.
And I would prefer to see Luke Thompson serving a suspension in the first 2 games if it's still a 2-game suspension, in the first 2 games of next season.
I totally agree, and I say we're penalising ourselves, and what we want to see is Luke Thompson ripping into the Samoans, don't we?
That's what I would like to see.
We don't want to be seen sat at home in the stands or sat at home watching on telly. We want to see Luke Thompson getting ripped in there. But you mentioned, other important players, obviously. Jaifield I thought was excellent, but also I reckon one of the most important players for Wigan now at this moment in time is the loose forward, Kearnan. I think he's been absolutely...
He's improved an awful lot, hasn't he?
He's been absolutely outstanding. He's been taking a hell of a lot of pressure off the half-backs at times. Himself getting to first man, maybe second man out, and then releasing Bevan French like he did, second, third man out there at the weekend from where he's playing like an old-fashioned loose forward, with his ball skills, but still, he's playing very tough. When he needs to take the ball in, make the hard yards, he's doing that. But again, the variation of Kearnan is excellent, and he's become a very important player for Wigan.
What's interesting about that, Gary, is that he moved into that role after Morgan Smithers left at the end of last season. Yeah. Morgan's had a great season at Canberra, by the way.
He has.
But Cade Ellis, has really adapted to that role incredibly well. And as you say, he's looked good all year. I mean, he looked good in that game against Penrith, the World Club Challenge at the start of the year, and he's maintained that standard. So yes, I think he's an outstanding player for Wigan.
Oh, without a doubt. And you look at everybody who's coming through from Wigan. You look at the philosophies, what they have. You look at the enjoyment, what they get out of winning. You look at the enjoyment. You look at the way that they want to keep on top all the time. The question is going to be, who's going to knock Wigan off? At this moment in time, I can't see anybody. And also, I mentioned to Martyn as well before we started here, Jake, was Wigan were that confident, right? And I'm not saying overconfident or overconfidence in a way, but Wigan were confident they was going to win on Saturday because they brought the other 3 trophies to have the picture taken by creating the history. That just shows you not just the confidence what they have, but also to that belief that when the pressure is on, Wigan can handle it, and they're proving it time and time again.
Absolutely.
I mean, the interesting thing about Wigan is that the question now is, can they maintain winning trophies in the way that they've done this year? And you'd be a fool to back against them, wouldn't you? And you've got to say that Matt Peat is such an interesting character because, I mean, he never played at a high level as a player. No. I think he played for the Wigan Academy, but didn't make the grade as a first-grade player. And yet he's demonstrating that you don't need to have played the game at the highest level to be a top coach. And he's got well,
I know that myself, don't worry about that.
Yeah. But he's an incredible thinker about the game. And he certainly manages to engender that incredible feeling of enjoyment. Not that it's not just professional, is it? You can see sometimes some other teams, both here and in the NRL, they're very professional, but they don't look to me as though they're automatically enjoying the game. They look as though it's a business rather than a pleasure. But Wigan under Matty Peat, they look to be having fun to me. They look as though it's, they wouldn't be doing anything. They won't want to be doing anything else.
I would imagine every time, I think I mentioned it before on the podcast when it was last time in, every time the Wigan players come into training, they'll come with a smile on their face because it's not just about the coaching, tinkering the little things right, with the defence and the attack and whatever. It's all about man management, and it's all about man management. I reckon we might be. I'm not saying he's not a quality coach because certainly the way he gets the best out of his players week in and week out, or certainly when it's a semi-final time, when it's final time, and he's got Sean O'Loughlin around there, and he's got Thomas Lulawai who'll be handing the backs, Sean O'Loughlin doing all the defence. But the most important factor for me with Matty Peat is quite simple. It's his man management. The players absolutely not just love playing for him, but I would imagine every day they come into training, they've got a smile on their face, and that's exactly the environment what Matty Peat has created.
Well, certainly I had the privilege last season, quite fairly early in the season, Matty Peat invited me over to watch Wigan training, and I can confirm that they were, they were incredibly professional, but they were enjoying it like a bunch of school kids. Basically, the players. They couldn't have been nicer. All the players came up to me and shook my hand. I'm not sure they all knew exactly who I was, but they couldn't have been more welcoming. Had lunch with them and so on. Then sat down with Matty for a chat about the game and what have you. And it was a great experience from my point of view. But you sort of looked at them and thought, gosh, this is going to be a good team this year. And they were last year.
I tell you what as well, Martyn, I saw an interview on Sky yesterday morning with Chris Ladlinsky, and even Chris Ladlinsky, you know, he's got the smile on his face, because obviously he will be, because the CEO, and obviously he does all the business off the field, but even Chris has got that smile on his face. Everybody from the top to the bottom is happy at Wigan Rugby League Club. And so when you look at what Wigan have done by giving Matty Peet that 7-year deal, along with Sean O'Loughlin and Thomas Lulawai, so now my question out there will be, Martyn, is how many trophies is Matty Peet? I think he's 7 he's already won in 2 years in charge. So 7 trophies he's won in 2 years. He's there for another 6 years. So the question is, Matty Peet, how many trophies is he going to win? And is he going to be the most successful Wigan coach ever? And is he going to be the most successful British coach in the history of rugby league? Because he's got 6 years to go and he ain't getting bored. All the enjoyment's there, and he's going to get the best out of Wigan players. And another thing want to say about Wigan is, when they know that a player is maybe not enjoying the Wigan environment. When examples here now, they let McAlorum go, they let Tompkins go, they let Williams go, they let Morgan Smithies go, they let Bateman go, because they know that conveyor belt of quality players. These players have got the DNA in their Wigan system. They know exactly what they're doing as an individual, know exactly how they're going to contribute to a team. I tell you what a great environment to go to work in.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Their training centre at Robin Park is absolutely excellent. It's everything that they need.
Can Matty Peet become the most successful coach of Wigan? How many did Graham Lowe and John Morley?
Well, we'd have to look back and check on that, wouldn't we?
But,
yeah,
he can't be far off.
But you've also got to ask. Matty Peet himself is still a very young man. You know, I think he's in his early 40s, isn't he? As I understand it, probably. I'd have to check his age, but he certainly looks a very young man. So his future, you've got to say, does he see himself coaching England one day? I certainly hope so, because that would be great. Obviously, would he see himself coaching England, you know, while at the same time coaching Wigan? Hopefully so. I can't see any reason why that wouldn't happen. But you know, is there an Australian club? I mean, there are going to be some new Australian clubs coming into the NRL in the near future. Perth obviously is one, probably, and the team based at Papua New Guinea. And of course there are 17 clubs already there. Would they be looking over here and, you know, deciding that they'd like to get Matty over there, and would he want to go if that opportunity did arise? I'm not absolutely sure he would, you know, because everything that Matty says is so Wigan-centred, isn't he? It's very difficult. I mean, he once had quite a short spell at Sale Rugby Union Club, didn't he, a few years ago? But it didn't stay there and came back to Wigan and then got offered the Wigan job in, you know, and won his first trophy in his first season in charge in 2022 when they won the Challenge Cup. So, you know, his future is obviously secure at Wigan if he wants it to be, and you assume that he does. And of course, Wigan is now owned by one of the richest men in England, in Mike Danson. So, you know, there's no shortage of resources there. The only problem, Gary, as I see it, is that I think back to that period from the mid-80s to the mid-90s.
Please don't.
When Wigan were absolutely...
Please don't, because we couldn't beat them.
You couldn't beat them, no. But nobody else could.
Nobody else could.
You know, only on a very one-off basis. Yeah. And Wigan won the Challenge Cup 8 years in a row. They won the Championship so many years as well. And it wasn't really healthy for the game as a whole, because people got bored with Wigan winning things. And, you know, as much as we admire Wigan and we admire Matty Peet and we admire all the players, we need them to be... we need somebody to be able to compete against them and, you know, occasionally beat them. If we can win all the trophies next year, for example, it will be great for Wigan, perhaps. But I'm not even sure it's great for Wigan, because I think the fans of clubs like Wigan, you know, there were signs in the 80s and 90s that the fans were getting quite bored with winning things.
Going down to Wembley they were, because they knew exactly what was going to happen.
Yes, they were always winning.
Going down to Wembley.
And, you know, it's a dilemma for the game, because you don't want to see Wigan weakened. You want to see Wigan continuing to be as good as they are, but you want to see other clubs being that good as well.
But I think with the Wigan, I think with the Wigan scenario today compared to what it was back in the 1890s, Wigan bought the team, didn't they?
Yes.
It's not most of these Wigan players are coming through the Wigan junior system.
That's right.
They're all part of the Wigan community, as has been mentioned. Every club mentions it regarding the junior level and through the community. Back in them days, they bought the team. They bought all the best players. You know, as we know from Hanley, Afire, Gregory, Edwards.
Yes.
Joe Lai. I don't need to go on. So I think that's a different scenario. Then we knew what happened with Wigan. You know, they had to get rid of Central Park. But now, this Wigan outfit, this Wigan club, from top to bottom, is so professional. I don't think anybody at that club who were involved in the club will get bored. I don't think the fans themselves will get bored, because what they are seeing is seeing quality junior players coming through that system. Everybody's enjoying that system. Everybody's enjoying going to work from there. So that my question is out there to every other Super League club. Can they stop Wigan? And at this moment in time, not just this moment in time or next year, the year after, Wigan are prepared to stay there as long as what Wigan wants to.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
and you look at that squad at the moment, you look at the players that are there, the players that have signed long-term contracts, as you mentioned, doesn't look like anyone wants to leave. And from the outside looking in, you get a sense, I can't see any players in that squad that could be tempted by money elsewhere. I mean,
no.
I'm sure there's been NRL teams that have probably gotten in touch with Bevan French's manager about his availability going forward. And, you know, I think it'd take a massive contract offer to get him away from Wigan back to the NRL. I just can't see them losing their dominance in the next few years.
You mentioned Bevan French. Let's just talk about him for a minute, because obviously the first ever winner of the Rob Burrow Award. And I made, Gary, I think you remarked on it as well, I made our image of the week, the Burrow children bringing out the new Rob Burrow trophy onto the field, you know, before the game, and both sets of supporters rising to them and giving them an incredible reception.
Yeah,
and it was actually quite moving. Almost brought a tear to my eye.
Yes.
To be honest, to see those young children coming out and looking, you know, so proud and so on. And it was marvellous to see, wasn't it?
Oh, brilliant. You know. Absolutely. You know, the Jackson's face when he came out there and he was just absolutely overawed. Yeah, absolute great tribute from everybody at Old Trafford for the Burrows family, and obviously, I say Rob as well. And also, Rob's dad, Jeff, presenting the trophy. He gave it a kiss himself before he passed it on to Bevan himself. So, yeah, absolutely spectacular. And well done to the Rugby Football League for organising all this. And I say it was a brilliant tribute to a great man.
It was, and the great thing is that all the winners of the Harry Sunderland Trophy, we've got a photograph of them in League Express on my page this week, by the way, the three children, but it was great to see that they've put all the names of the Harry Sunderland Trophy winners right from the very start, from Terry Fogarty in 1965 onto that new trophy.
And
you know, and I was not sure that it was the right thing to do to change the name of it. I'm not keen on changing the name of a trophy, but I think the Rugby Football League has done it really well. And you know, it was
they've not forgotten the history of the Premiership back in the old days, the old Premiership. So they've not forgotten the history,
and I think
everybody's on that trophy. Which is great.
That's important.
Which is great. Yeah. We mentioned Bevan French, and I say what a quality player he has been at Wigan. I saw in your column as well, Martyn, and my team could do with him now, couldn't we, Leeds? But you mentioned Bevan French to Gary Errington a few years ago.
Yes.
What was Gary's reaction to that?
Well, it was very
I'm saying what we could do with him now.
Yeah, it was back in 2016, and I had just been watching an NRL game, Parramatta. I think they were playing Canterbury, if I remember rightly. And I think Bevan French scored two absolutely brilliant tries. And I was later that week, I was speaking to Gary on the phone, and I said, Gary, did you see that game? And there's a kid called Bevan French who's I've never heard of before, who's got incredible speed, evasive ability, and so on. Everything he's still got now, of course. And I said, he's a kid you ought to watch out for. And, you know, think about if you ever get the chance, bring him to Leeds. And Gary had never heard of him and said, yeah, I'll watch that game then, and I'll have a look and see what I think. And I don't know whether he ever did. I assume he probably did. But
the rest is history. The rest is history.
But
it's shining for Wigan and it's not playing for my team.
What's interesting about Bevan French at Parramatta, he started there in 2016. He had 3 seasons at Parramatta. But, you know, later in his Parramatta career, I think 2018, badly hurt his shoulder early in the season, and I think he lost quite a bit of confidence at that point. He came back into the side, but wasn't quite the same player because of that, carrying that problem. And the coach at the time was Brad Arthur, who, of course, coincidentally is now at Leeds. And at the end of the 2018 season, Bevan French still had another year on his contract at Parramatta, but Brad Arthur decided he probably wasn't going to fully recover and released him. And he started playing with Wentworthville in the New South Wales Cup, and again scored lots of tries for them. And Wigan signed him in July of 2019. And as you say there, the rest is history. And he's now become only the fourth player. He's become. He made 2 records on Saturday. He's the first player to win the Lanstod Trophy and now the Rob Burrow Award, or Harry Sunderland trophies it used to be, in the same season. So that's a historic record. And he's become only the fourth player to win all 3 major individual trophies in the British game, because he won the Man of Steel Award in 2023. So he follows in the footsteps of George Nichols, Joe Lydon and Paul Wellens, because they all won those 3 trophies at various times in their careers as well. Sadly, Gary, you missed out, mate, I'm afraid. But, it's an amazing record, isn't it?
Oh, brilliant record, absolutely.
Brilliant record. To have done that is quite incredible.
And who's to say he won't keep doing it? How long's he signed for Wigan? Has he got 3 or 4 years left?
He's got at least another couple of years.
Who's to say he's not going to do it next year and the season after? Because, boy oh boy, he can play.
Yeah.
He can play. Yeah. And to tell you what, you mentioned there about Gary Everton. If he didn't watch him, I tell you what, I bet he wish he would have done now.
Well, that's right. But the interesting thing was that at Parramatta, they actually let him go at the end of 2018, as I understand it, because he wanted to play full back, and of course they'd got a young Clint Gutherson on the in the squad as well, and they obviously thought Clint Gutherson's been a great player for Parramatta, no doubt about that. So they actually thought, they didn't think about switching him to stand off at Parramatta, and of course at Wigan, Jay Field's playing at full back, so. Bevan is playing at standoff, partnering Harry Smith, and it's working brilliantly, isn't it?
I think when he first came over he was playing a lot of wing and centre, and then eventually they put him at standoff as well. Just watching him play, though, he's got one of the crispest long balls I've seen. Like, he's got beautiful hands. The way the ball just spirals through the air, hits the players in the chest every time.
He can create play like nobody's business.
Yes, and just a real game breaker. So I'd love to see him in the Australian side. Well, after that performance on the weekend, I thought we could use someone like him as a 14 off the bench. But obviously, Mal Meninga probably doesn't watch much.
Yeah, but to be honest with you, the Aussies aren't lacking in halfbacks, are they?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I think you might say, how long do you have to be here to get a residential qualification?
Is it 3 years, 5 years?
5 years. I think it's moved to 5 years now, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Sean Wayne won't drop George Williams.
No, but he came in 2019, so he's actually been here for 5 years now.
Yeah, he's approaching.
But I doubt whether he'd ever put his hand up for England. But you never know, do you?
Yeah, I mean, well, he's not going to get a look with Australia at the moment, so he may as well.
I mean, does he have? That's interesting, though. Does he have South Pacific Island heritage as well? I'm not quite so sure.
Not sure. He's played for the Indigenous All-Stars, so Australia he's represented, but he could still have heritage. We're not sure.
You never know, but Indigenous rather than South Pacific.
Well, can I just say this as well? I'm not for Aussies playing for England.
No, I know, and I'm not either, actually, Gary. I don't think it ever works.
Forget Bevan French for our national team, okay? Doesn't matter how good he is for Wigan.
What's your stance on Victor Radley?
No, I don't want Australians playing for us.
Don't we? No.
Full stop.
Yep.
No, I don't.
Even with an English father?
No, I don't. No.
Fair enough.
No. I don't want any Australians playing for England or Great Britain.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, guys, now there was a little bit of controversy. Peta Hiku is potentially facing 3 to 5 weeks, I believe, for unnecessary contact following that Junior Nsemba concussion. If you look back at the vision, contact sort of made, the tacklers sort of fall off the tackle and then they dive back on him, and then as they're getting up, I think Hiku sort of moves Nsemba's arm just to see if he's okay. Yeah. And then as he sees that he's knocked out, he looks to the sideline and sort of tries to signal a trainer or a first aid officer. The match review panel's charged him and he's facing 3 to 5 weeks. What are your thoughts on that?
That seems absolutely absurd to me.
I agree.
You know, it just is ridiculous. And of course, it's got a big impact on Peta Hiku because he's in the New Zealand squad for the Pacific Cup.
And might I just add, it's been a long time since he's represented New Zealand. So a great achievement for him to be picked in that squad.
It is. I mean, I'm not up to date with the latest on that, but surely there will be. I mean, it can't be found guilty, surely.
It was no malice in it at all.
No.
Well, we've seen in the past where it looks like a player may be milking it, and then the opposition's picked him up by the jersey, telling him to play the ball. But the fact that Hiku's just grabbed his arm just to see if he's conscious,
doing the right thing. Common sense, quite clearly, has got to prevail on this. Common sense has got to prevail, and forget about it there because Hiku was doing exactly the right thing. He was.
I would imagine that Hiku's plans this week were to fly to New Zealand almost straight after the game. So I don't know whether this has delayed him from doing that and maybe preventing him from being picked for New Zealand in that first game against Australia.
And if it is on the the bigger scale, 5 weeks, that puts him out for the tournament and potentially round 1 next year, or he will miss some sort of fixtures next year. So yeah, as you said, Gary, I just hope common sense prevails.
Absolutely, common sense has to prevail. Got to do. Without a doubt, he was doing the right thing. Simple as that.
Absolutely. Now, Chris Rodlinski, he's come out and said that he wants the World Club Challenge to go ahead next year. They're trying to, I guess, get back into discussions with Penrith.
Penrith has been very dogmatic about not playing it. So, I mean, it would be great to see it played. But the shame of it is that the World Club Challenge wasn't planned for the weekend in Las Vegas because both Wigan and Penrith are going, ironically. And it would be marvellous to see them playing each other at Allegiant Stadium. But obviously Penrith are playing Cronulla and we're going to play in Warrington, and you can't change that now. So I don't think the World Club Challenge will take place, and I think actually that'd be putting an awful lot of stress on Wigan's players to go to Australia to play Penrith in Australia, then to fly to the United States to play Warrington there. They'd be pretty shattered by the time they got there, I think.
Well, Nathan Cleary put up a Instagram post just over the weekend. I think he suggested that they should look at playing the World Club Challenge at the NRL's Magic Weekend next year because we've got 17 teams. One team has to have a bye. So his suggestion would be Penrith get that bye and then play.
Well, that's an interesting idea.
At Magic Weekend. But I guess it's harder, though, because it's in the middle of both seasons. Do you think Wigan would be open to that idea?
Oh, I think Wigan would love to do something like that. I can't speak for Wigan, obviously. That's up to them. But, I think Wigan would love to test themselves against the best in Australia. And that's a really interesting idea, isn't it, by Nathan?
That's what Wigan love to do. They love to test themselves against the best, don't they? Because,
they do.
All right, it would be pretty hard, as we know, with the travelling and the jet lag and recovery. But what Wigan do realise is, and we all know in Super League, that you'd have to be at the best week in and week out there. So if they're going at the Magic Weekend, when's that played in Australia? Is it June, July time?
It's around May, June.
Yeah. May, June, July time. So realistically, it's only a 2-week period from there. Wigan, can they afford to lose 2 or 3 games throughout the season? Of course they can. Of course they can. And I can tell you, Wigan would say, without a shadow of a doubt, if the World Club Challenge can be played at the Magic Weekend in Brisbane, they will be on the first flight out there.
And it would work for the Aussies, wouldn't it? Because then there'd be 18 teams playing, so every team would be involved. Because, of course, when you've only got 17... one team misses out, doesn't it?
Yeah. Great idea.
Yeah, I just wish there was a little bit more forward planning in terms of Vegas and potentially whoever makes that, the grand finals, they leave a slot aside for the 2 winners to go and play in it.
Yeah, well, that would be obvious, wouldn't it? And maybe that, who knows?
It's one for the future,
that might happen. Yeah, that might happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Radlinski also had some comments on SEN Radio. He went on Andrew Voss and Greg Alexander's show. One of the comments he made that's caused a bit of stir online was Radlinski saying that Wigan might be the only club that would not welcome Nathan Cleary's services in the whole world because of the combination they have at the moment with Harry Smith and Bevan French. Do you believe him that Wigan wouldn't be interested in Cleary if he was to come on the market?
The answer? No.
Don't believe him?
No. If anybody... If Nathan Cleary puts his... Well, obviously, he was on Sky, wasn't he? And as we say at half-time, and he just... Obviously, we've heard the rumours are going around, and he just said, well, not for now. But if he does make himself available... I can tell you, I reckon who would go for Cleary, and he would just literally pay whatever he wants. I reckon, not just Chris Ligland's Wigan, but I reckon Derek Beaumont would pay anything to get Nathan Cleary playing there for the
Simon Moran at Warrington.
Maybe so, but it won't be short of offers. But yeah,
but to be honest, Gary, if Nathan Cleary did come into the British game, I'd prefer him not to go to Wigan because Wigan are good enough already, aren't they? As we've already been saying.
There's no two ways about it.
And they've got Harry Smith. I mean, whose kicking game is certainly pretty comparable to Nathan Cleary's.
And what's Harry's? He's only 24, 25.
A young man. Yeah,
he's got at least another 8 years.
Yes,
but barring no injuries, he's okay. Yeah.
I mean, let's send Nathan to somewhere else.
Send him to Leeds, please. Yeah. We need him. We need him.
Yes.
Yeah, Derek, leave him alone. Let him come to Leeds.
I'm not sure Gary would pay through the nose, though.
We know he won't pay for him. Don't worry about that. He won't pay for him.
I think London's announced plans that they hope to return to Super League in the next 2 or 3 years.
Great
I think.
News.
So,
do we know who's taking them over though yet?
No, not
from
yet.
David Hughes, because I mean but they are continuing to play at the Cherry Red Records Stadium in Wimbledon, aren't they? That's the major thing they've announced.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's great news, I think, because I think that's a really nice venue. I mean, you've seen it, Gary, haven't you?
Yeah. And we can't speak highly enough of David Hughes coming for what he's done for London for the last 27 years.
Well, for how much money he's
spent.
We
know how much he's, it's 25, 30 million pounds of his own money.
It could have had a yacht in the Mediterranean, couldn't he?
So he's been a great man for the game, and hopefully somebody else will come in from there. And London, well, the way they've been treated this year, all right, they did finish bottom, but at the end of the day, there was an Addington off, and the adversity was totally against them. They've been a great season. Mike Eccles and the players have been an absolute credit to London Broncos.
They have, and I'll tell you what, they only finished bottom because of the golden point rule.
Correct.
Because they had 2 golden point games against Leeds, lost them both,
and they lost to Hull in the last 30 seconds.
Yes,
at their stadium. So very unlucky. Very unlucky.
And it's a shame to see so many of their players now. Going elsewhere. And Oliver Leyland going to Warrington. And I think he's been a real good chunky little player, Oliver Leyland. I really hope he gets some opportunities at Warrington and does well for them.
Yeah, definitely. Now, just on the crowd attendance, I think there was just over 68,000 at the grand final. Do you think that's a good showing?
Well, it's 10,000 more than last year, but of course it was the Catalan Dragons who were there last year. So it's heading back up. We ran an article the previous week in League Express saying they were hoping for 70. Didn't quite get that, but it certainly looked very full, didn't it?
It looked like they had some pretty good TV ratings as well. It seemed like there was a massive increase in people watching this year compared to last year, which is great news, obviously.
But I'll tell you what as well, Roger, we mentioned that crowd and also too that the fans from Hulkinson Rovers, I know we've been praising Wigan, what a great club they are, but I'll tell you what, Hulkinson Rovers, for me, the way they've done their recruitment for next year and the quality of players, what they've already got, Hulkinson Rovers now, they've had a taste of it. They had the semi-final of the Challenge Cup. They finished second in the league. They've had a taste of the grand final. The way that they're going off the field, and certainly from the fans and the sponsors, they're going to next year they're going to average maybe between 11 and 12,000. Hulkinson Rovers, they're here to stay. They don't want to be. They don't want it to be a one-off. They're here to stay, and they will be competing at least for the top 4 spots. I would say for the next 5 or 6 years.
What's interesting, Gary, is the way that they've built up their support.
Correct.
Better than any other club in the game, really. Compared, from where they started. I mean, some years ago they were in the 3rd tier and getting 2,000 and odd. But you think back to 2016 when they lost that game.
I was there.
That £1 million game dropped goal by O'Brien. They went down to the Championship, and at that point, Neil Hudgell, the owner, could have very easily walked away.
Correct.
And I've got to say, I mean, I've spoken to him briefly, and he did think about doing so but didn't, thank goodness. Instead, stayed on and recruited more people onto the board, and very crucially recruited Paul Lakin, who's a very smart chief executive. I'm hoping we're going to have Paul on this podcast at some point in the near future now the season's over. But the key to doing well is always to recruit the right people, isn't it?
It is.
And you pick the right people, you get a sense of purpose, and the sky's the limit then. And if you've got the right people, and Neil Hudgell has been smart enough to do that, he's stood back a bit now, letting other people take the glory. Because I remember, that 2015 Challenge Cup final where they lost 50-0 to Leeds, and that could have been very dispiriting for them as well, couldn't it?
Yeah.
But since then they've made massive changes, completely new personnel, both on and off the field, and it's just worked brilliantly for them. They've got plans to improve the stadium, develop it more and increase its capacity and so on. And it's incredible what they're doing, and all credit to them. And hopefully, if anybody is going to challenge Wigan in the next few years, it will be them. Hopefully, not just them, but other teams too. And you can't speak highly enough of them.
Well, I was at that game when they lost it, by that drop goal by O'Brien, and I'll tell you the sombre mood. When you talk about being sombre and disappointment, yeah, there were. But I was in the big major sponsor room there, and you know what? Even after the game, all the fans just says, we're sticking with Rovers. All the sponsors says, we can see something happening here. We're going to be on a journey. However long this journey is going to be, we're on this journey. And all the sponsors, so the loyalty of the supporters, the loyalty of the sponsors, what they did after that game, because, yes, it was massively disappointing from Brighton, but they says, we can see what's happening in this club. We're sticking by this club. And here we are now, 2024, just literally. Grand final, been to Wembley last year, got beat by Leeds. Semi-final this time, second in the league. I'll tell you what, this is going to be an even better, bigger journey for the Rovers. And well done to the fans and sponsors for being loyal to them.
It's interesting as well. There's that sort of sliding doors moment feeling, isn't there? Because what would have happened if Hull KR had won that game, if they'd added the drop goal in golden point time and Salford had gone down? I think Salford would have been in really massive trouble. They wouldn't have recovered from it, and I think they'd be a shadow of the team that they are now if they go down. So it was actually, in with hindsight, just the right result, because they lost in a very, such a tight manner, didn't it? It was such a tight game. And for them to lose in the way they did, it didn't depress them. It inspired them to come back from it, didn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And not to mention Coach of the Year and Man of Steel, both playing both at Hull KR this season.
Year, So Willie Peters and Mikey Lewis.
Say, Matt, as well, what do you reckon about the awards before the end of the season? I think it should be after the end of the season, mate. I do.
Well, I think I've got to be honest. You've got to say that if a coach wins all 4 trophies during the year, it's got to be the Coach of the Year, with no disrespect to Willie Peters.
Correct.
And I'm sure Willie Peters would probably accept that. And similarly, Bevan French wasn't even in the top 3 for the Man of Steel vote. But and the problem. I think Willie Peters and Michael Lewis winning those awards was great and thoroughly deserved at the time. You can only decide on the awards at the time they're given. But the trouble is, I also think it probably, as if Wigan needed any extra motivation,
without a doubt,
it probably gave it to them, didn't it?
Yeah.
You're sitting at the sidelines watching on and saying, well, he's got the nod. Well, we'll see about that this Saturday.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it should be changed. The Man of Steel should be changed at the end. When the season's finished, that's when the awards should be done.
But they do the same thing in Australia as well, don't they?
Well, we don't need to copy Australians.
I couldn't agree more.
The Man of Steel didn't used to be that way. It used to be the end of the season when the season finished.
Absolutely, it should be again.
That's what it used to be. So, let's stop copying the Australians what they do.
Yeah,
let's get back to his own figures, his own ideas, his own heritage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sorry, Jake.
That's
sorry,
all right, mate. Just tell me to go.
I'll tell you what, Gary. If you were IMG saying that, you'd be earning £450,000 a year in the RFL. Let's stop copying Australia. Absolutely. Let's see whether IMG say that.
Now,
forget about them.
gents, unless there's anything else you want to touch on Super League Grand Final related, we had some other matches take place on the weekend.
We did.
Obviously. Can I just say as well, and I think everybody knows my ties with officials, but I've got to say I thought Chris Kendall was absolutely outstandanding.
Yeah, I agree.
He was absolutely outstanding on Saturday night. You didn't know he was there, and that's what it's all about, being a quality official. So I'm hoping every Super League referee for next year, take a note out of Chris's book. You don't want to be noticed. Get your job done and get yourself off the field.
And the thing
well
is,
done, Chris Kendall. I thought he was outstanding.
I totally agree with you. And it's interesting that Chris Kendall does occasionally take a lot of stick from fans.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I think he got every decision right.
It was outstanding.
And no argument at all. I mean, if a referee deserves an award, he certainly does.
One thing I have appreciated just reading the online comments, a lot of Hull KR fans have been quite humble in defeat, I found. Like, there hasn't been much blaming.
No.
They've just all sort of agreed that Wigan were just a better team on the pitch.
Not blaming anybody else.
Which is great to see.
The KR fans and the sponsors, they are enjoying this journey. You know?
And it's not ended.
No, it's not. Oh, no, it's not ended. And I say, Mr. Hudgell behind the lines and the CEO there in there, they are on this journey, and this journey is nowhere near finished.
And we sort of guess we've got to commend them for they turned out in numbers on Saturday night. I was looking down their end of the stadium, and there wasn't an empty seat that could be seen.
No.
So yeah, hats off to the Hull KR fans. Now over the weekend, Toulouse. They had a close win over Bradford. I believe it was 21-20 was the score in that one, I believe.
Was. Yes.
Which sees them going on to play Wakefield in this weekend's
this Saturday night,
final.
yes, at Bellevue,
Yes.
in the Championship Grand Final, with promotion not at stake, unfortunately. Isn't that ridiculous?
Yeah, so
isn't that ridiculous?
either side could lose and still be playing Super League next year on the grading system.
Well, everybody's assuming that Wakefield will be in Super League next year on the grading system, and I'm sure they deserve to be. But, it would be good if they had to win on Saturday night to clinch it, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
I'm sure. I actually be interested to know what their fans think, because I bet a few of them, if that were the case, they'd be quite nervous. Probably more nervous than they are now, actually.
Yep.
Because I think they're probably more confident on gradings than on winning the game, because they had a very tough game against York at the weekend. It was. Mark Applegarth brought York to Wakefield, of course, who had been coaching at Wakefield until last year, and gave them a hell of a game, winning at half-time. It was 7 points to 6 at half-time to York. So at that point, it looked as though Wakefield might not be...
They were still leading with 12 minutes to go, Martyn.
Yeah.
They were still leading with 12 minutes to go.
It was Wakefield only just got over them to win that game. And I was really pleased for Mark Applegarth, because if ever a coach got the short shrift really at Wakefield last year, it was him. He was appointed to coach a team that had virtually nothing spent on it, with a squad that was clearly not quite up to the mark, and he did his best. But if you've not got the cattle, you can't produce the beef, can you?
Correct.
So I think he's a very good coach, and I think he's I hope that he goes on from strength to strength to do well with York next year.
Well, he's got a good chairman there in Clint Goodchild, don't we?
Yes,
he's got a good chairman,
right.
so he'll get the full back in there from York. But also, as well, when you look at the Wakefield scenario, and I'm not saying this will happen, because they'll want to. They have finished top. They've got the league leaders' shield, and they want to win on Saturday to prove that they have been the best team. But also, as well, very much like Hull this season, because they knew, and then players knew, that there was going to be in Super League next year. They just had the factor 6 on, so they weren't really bothered. And I'm not saying the Wakefield players will be doing it on Saturday because they want to win the trophy, but the Wakefield players will know. They will know, with this ridiculous grading system, that they know they're going to be in Super League next year, which I find absolutely pathetic.
Yes, I mean,
as has been mentioned, sport is all about winning the trophies, and if you're the worst team, relegation. And we've mentioned it before. It's pathetic.
The only thing you can say about it is that we'll get 0.25 grading points. Which almost sounds ridiculous when you say it.
Well, it is ridiculous, isn't it? It is ridiculous.
It really is.
Surely it means a bit more than just 0.25. That's ridiculous.
No, but the point I'm making, the players will know. The players will know, even if they win, lose, or draw, or whatever on Saturday. They know Wakefield are going to be in Super League next year.
Yeah.
So the pressure's not on from a point of view where it's a do or die situation. We have to win. Or if we don't win, then we're in the Championship again next year.
Yeah. The tragedy for the Championship this year is it's not been televised.
This should be televised properly on Sky, shouldn't it?
Well, IMG are supposed to be experts in broadcasting.
Messing things up.
Well, they're supposed to be experts in broadcasting, and you'd have thought that they would have managed to come up with a TV deal for the Championship. Now, this Saturday's game, it is going to be on the Sportsman website, so let's be grateful for that, and well done the Sportsman website for being able to get the game on there, and of course it's going to be an interesting game. It's Jermaine McGilvery's last game as a professional player, so I'd just like to wish Jerry the best of luck for Saturday night, and I hope he scores at least one try, and and goes out on a high, which would be marvellous, wouldn't it?
You see, also as well, again, when we talk about this grading system, what ING have done, done the best to ruin our game. When you look at Wakefield's crowd this year, sport tells you all about. Like Wakefield, when they were in Super League, they wasn't get anywhere near the crowds what they get in the season, because the Wakefield fans, I would say most of the time when they turned up at Bellevue from there, they knew they was going to get beat, right? But sport is all about them. But fans will come back. The fans will come back out of the woodwork. If they've got a winning side, they've got a side that's been played attractive rugby league, then fans will come back. You look at the crowds, what Wakefield have got this year, sport is all about winning. And that's what Wakefield have been, and the fans have been delighted with what they've seen this year. Sometimes they've had 5,000-6,000 people from there, and it's all about winning. Rugby league fans, any other sport fan, I would imagine, are not interested about grading systems from there. No. Sport is all about winning and losing and what happens on the field.
No, absolutely. We also had some League One news. Hunslet's been promoted.
Hunslet promoted, yes.
As we see, you got the jacket on here.
Yeah, Hunslet promoted.
Well, it's interesting. I was just saying that Wakefield's game this Saturday will be on the Sportsman. Well,
we'll talk about the celebration of the Hunslet fans, what it means, Martyn. What sport's all about.
The Swinton Hunslet game on Sunday night, unfortunately, it was played too late for us to get a report in League Express this week, so we're going to put it in next Monday's paper. But, it was great. It was actually a tremendous game. I've actually just watched it since Sunday night, and very, very well contested. Two passionate sets of players, passionate supporters. I don't know. I mean, Hunslet sounded as though they've got about 1,000 fans there, but they only get about 400 or 500 at home.
Yeah.
So, the Hunslet fans were chanting the whole game through, and it was a thrilling match. And 2-point win, 22 points to 20, the final scoreline. The lead kept changing hands all the time. The Hunslet players were absolutely, over the moon at the end of the game. The Swinton players looked as though, they'd all like to be shot. Or
that's what sport's all about.
That's what sport's all about. Of course it is.
Winning and losing, but also as well from Hunslet's point of view. The back of the championship now, and I say the great man who was massive part of the club, Graham Lyles, and I say my ex-boss I used to work for, Jack Lund. They survived Hunslet Rugby League Club from there, and Graham Lyles, he passed on then all his shares because it's supporters trust now at Hunslet. It's run by the supporters, but the board of directors in the chairman, in Kenny Sykes, the CEO in Neil Hampshire, they've got Peter Jarvis, they've got Phil Hodgson there. They're doing a great job. They're doing an absolute great job. But then, by the way, Martin, they've done it the hard way. They finished fourth in the league.
They did.
So they've had to go to Rochdale twice. They've gone to Keith.
And they lost to Rochdale the first time.
They lost to Rochdale the first time. And they've gone to Swinton, who have been in the championship and not been a bad side at times in the championship. But again, it just shows you what sport is all about. It's all about winning and being promoted. So I'm just hoping now, because I've been to a few Hunslet games over the last 2 or 3 years. A good friend of mine, Wayne Baldwinson, he's been one of their sponsors. So I've been there. It's a great setup. Great stadium there at South Leeds, and hopefully now with the quality of rugby that's going to be played, the quality of teams that's coming to the South Leeds, rather than 500 people coming, let's get Hunslet up there with 1,500 and 2,000 fans, because the club certainly deserves it.
It certainly does.
It does.
Get the people of South Leeds
Absolutely,
behind them.
Yeah.
I tell you what was quite interesting about that run. Hunslet started off the playoffs by going to Rochdale and losing.
Yeah, they did.
And in the second game, they played at home against the Midlands Hurricanes, and they only just won late on that game. They came from behind. I mean, it's funny that, isn't it? It could have been Midlands Hurricanes.
Oh, yeah.
They've improved a lot this year, and it's great to see, that team based in Birmingham. I just hope they're here to stay and that they, continue to improve and do well.
And I can tell you now, the Hunslet fans are singing the old song, we'll swept the seas before, boys, and so we shall again, what it says on the badge. And also to the Hunslet fans, what they're saying now is that they're looking to keep the noisy neighbours over the river, the Leeds Rhinos, they're hoping to keep them quiet.
Yep.
Absolutely. Well, I can go back to 1965.
You know what the rival is, right, Marty, don't you, with Hunslet and Leeds?
Oh, I do, but I can go back to 1965, the Challenge Cup semi-final that year at Headingley, between Wakefield, Trinity and Hunslet. With Wakefield, of course, I was a Wakefield fan, still am in many respects, but we went into that game confident we were going to Wembley again, and Hunslet beat us 8-0. And I can remember that we've swept, I was a little young kid then in those days, but I remember the Hunslet fans being conducted by the great Jeff Gunney, who came over to the main stand and conducted the Hunslet fans in singing that song. We've swept the seas before, boys,
and so we shall again.
And so we shall again. And it's always stuck in my memory.
I'll tell you what, Martyn.
And it made me feel sick on the day, I've got to say.
Well, I tell you, every Friday morning, they have an Hunslet club, the breakfast club where a lot of the ex-players and the fans, they meet on a Friday morning, 10 o'clock till 12, and just talk about all the great time. And I think it's about 6 months ago, it's the first time I'd ever watched it. The 65 final against Wigan. I tell you what a game that was, wasn't it? The first time I'd ever seen it. At times it was brutal, but yeah, Hunslet now, they're back where they belong. It's going to be tough. They're going to need some quality, a little bit more quality players, not just to compete, but to stay in the Championship, because it's going to be hard for him. And I just hope they recruit very well, get the players that want to play for Hunslet, do well for Hunslet and stay there, because the club deserves it, and well done to the board of directors.
Absolutely,
Absolutely. All right, fellas, well, we're sort of coming to the end of the podcast now. We do have some international fixtures taking place this weekend. Australia versus Tonga. Well, it's actually Friday morning for us. They've announced the sides. Martyn, we were having a little bit of a look through before the episode.
It looks a very strong Australian side.
Yeah, especially considering the players that are out with injury.
Well, Nathan Cleary's not playing, but my goodness, they've got some very good players who are. Looking at the side, Dylan Edwards at fullback, wingers Xavier Coates and Zach Lomax. Zach Lomax I really rate incredibly highly.
Got a new halves combination as well, with Tom Dearden and Mitchell Moses.
Tom Dearden and Mitch Moses. Playing against Tuilola here, the Huddersfield standoff. So, the Tongans are going to be, facing quite a challenge. And Isaiah Katoa, of course, is his halfback partner. So I think, I'm expecting a fairly convincing Australian win on Friday morning, Jake. And be interested to see what the crowd figures are for that game, because it certainly won't be, it won't be a massive crowd there, will it, in a 50,000 seater stadium?
Yeah, it's
probably about 20,000 perhaps.
I think there's a bit of concern in the rugby league community down in Australia at the moment with how little hype there is around the international fixtures at the moment. It's coming straight after the grand final.
I'll tell you what my what I would like to see. I think the international programme should be moved to the middle of the season in July.
I agree.
And it would be if we blanked off July. It's like in football, we get these blank weekends for club football so that internationals can be played.
It's like what rugby union do, don't they?
Let's blank off a month, and say that the 4 weeks or so in July will all be international games, whether it's Great Britain or England touring Australia, or them coming here. Whatever it is, let's do that, because you would get you would get far more interest in those games, because the problem is in Australia, once the grand final is played, a lot of people just think that's the end of the rugby league season, and it should be, shouldn't it? Really, you end with the biggest game of the season. So let's look hard at the way the rugby league season is structured in both hemispheres. Let's get it so that both hemispheres are coordinated, and we have a July. And quite bluntly, if we played internationals in this country in July involving Australia, we'd get a lot more Australian supporters coming over, because quite bluntly, it's much nicer in England in July than it is in November, as you know, Jake, don't you?
Yeah.
And English fans would love to go over to Australia at that time of the year as well, because they can take their kids. School's ended, and so on. You can. You can go out there and have a great time, and as I've done that in the past as well. So let's think about it.
Yeah,
I agree. And also another thing from a point of view is that at international level, you want the best for the best, don't you?
Of course you do.
Best for the best, playing the best, and then find out who's the top.
At the end of the season, Gary, every club, and I don't care which club it is, they want their players to rest,
or if they need operations,
and to be sorted out. Yeah, if they need to,
and rightly so.
Yeah,
rightly so, because the players are the club's possession.
Yes, because they
don't want them playing any longer.
They're contracted to the club.
So, and if we are going to be serious about an international calendar, and that's a great suggestion there from Martyn. Let's blank the July from there and get the best. Be the best. The players have already been ripped in for about 3 or 4 months. They're all in good form. Hopefully, all the best players are not carrying injuries, and we can see the best.
Absolutely,
no, definitely. And just looking towards the England Samoa series, I think Super League players named in the Samoan squad was John Asiata and Ricky Latelli. I believe have been named from Lee, obviously, or Asiata's now a Hull FC man, I guess you could say. But good to see them being picked for that series. Well deserved.
Well, the Samoans will be a very strong side, won't they? I think this year. Jerome Luai is going to be effectively leading them, and no Stephen Crichton, very sadly, which he would be a great asset to them if he were coming. So I think I think obviously we'd been hoping. By the way, we're talking here on Tuesday at 1:00. We'd been hoping that Sean Wayne would have named his England squad today. That was originally supposed to happen, but actually he won't name it now until Wednesday. Partly, I think, to see whether Luke Thompson manages to, appeal successfully against that suspension. Maybe one or two other issues with players carrying injuries as well. So, so he's put back his announcement till Wednesday. So we don't know yet what the England team will be, but we'll be no doubt discussing that next week.
No, definitely. Right, gents, anything else you want to mention before we wrap things up here today?
No, I don't think so.
No, I'm pretty happy with that, yeah.
Yeah.
Good, and I'm looking forward to the test series. I'm only a little disappointed it's not a 3-match test series, but Samoa will get here this week, and I would imagine, Wayne, hopefully he'll have his best place to pick from, and I'm predicting a one-apiece. It's a one-apiece test series. They call it the revenge test series, aren't they? Because obviously what Samoa did to us in the semi-final of the World Cup. I'm tipping England will win the first one, Samoa then will get used to all the conditions, and they'll beat us in the second one at I'm tipping a one-apiece test series.
Yeah,
right.
Perfect.
Great stuff.
All right, we'll wrap it up here. Thanks again for joining us,
Pleasure.
Garry,
Thank
mate.
you very much. Pleasure.
Always a pleasure when you come on, mate. And we'll meet back and do it again next week, Martyn.
Thanks, Jake.
No worries. All right, cheers, guys.
Cheers.